welcome to They Overcame by. My name is Jason Moore, and we're here for another episode to glorify God, our Father. Now, folks, if this is your first time watching, this is a channel that does nothing but share the glories of God through testimonies. So we hope that as you watch, if this is your first time, that you will be blessed. All right, folks, before we do anything else, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come before your throne and ask you, Lord, to join us in the midst of testimonies that ultimately glorify your name and who you are. For that person that's watching right now that may be in the midst of their midnight hour, I pray, Lord, that you will speak through the testimonies of your children. Now, Lord, have your way. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, folks, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that you tuned in to us once again. I pray that you are blessed. We have a really good testimony by the name of Corinthia Chester. Corinthia Chester, she gives her testimony about how the Lord still worked in her life despite herself. It is truly a blessing. Now, we do have an extra special something for you today at the end of our testimony, so please don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. I promise you that you will be richly blessed. All right, I'm going to get out of the way. This testimony is by Corinthia Chester.
My name is Corinthia Tia Chester, and I'm giving my testimony on They Overcame by. My testimony is a simple one, but it just shows the power of God when you give him full control over your life. A few years ago, Youth Congress was held here in Atlanta, Georgia. It was at the World Congress Center, which is right beside CNN. I remember walking through CNN and just saying in my head, I'm going to work here one day, not knowing that the power of the tongue really does have power. A few months later, after I said that prayer to God, which I didn't even realize was a prayer, I met a young lady named Jennifer McCurdy who goes to Berean SDA Church. She was working at CNN. I asked her, how did you get in at CNN? And she says, I started through a temp program. So I went online to try to find the temp program to start within CNN, and I couldn't find it because you have to go through a process. And I couldn't find it, so I gave up because I was like, it's just not meant to be, and I'll try at a different time. Lo and behold, the next day I got a phone call and said, hey, you applied for the Turner Temp program? And I said, yes. And I said, but I wasn't able to apply online, so how'd you get my information? They said, well, we didn't, for some reason, it still came through, so we have your information. Do you want to come up here for an interview? So I did. It was raining. A lot of things happened, and I did end up begin to temp in CNN. That's not even the testimony of the story. It just begins to show when God has something on your life that nothing can stop it. So I began to work at CNN, and I sat at the front desk. I went through a breakup. I was sleeping in the same bed as my mom. I had lost my other job, so it was a really low point at this point. So I was thinking like, okay, God is about to bring something big. But then he was like, nope, you're going to go sit out at the concierge desk in front of CNN so everybody can see you when they walk in. I thought this was the low point because I was feeling like Joseph, like, oh, Lord, I'm in the prison. But God was about to take me to the penthouse. So I was sitting there, and this girl comes down, and she says, hey, I'm about to leave. Do you want to take my job? And I was like, what? Yes. So I interviewed for her job, and I got it. So, but that job was kind of like an HR job where I would go around to different departments and help out. Well, while I was doing that job, Sanjay Gupta's person that was working with him had to go out for sick leave for 3 months. So she went out for 3 months, and she wasn't the nicest person. So when I came back, there was some things that she was supposed to give me that she didn't. And it's funny because, again, like I said earlier, how power lies in the tongue. Sanjay sent me an email because he was out of town, and he said, I didn't know today was your last day. I would have taken you to lunch if I would have known that. I said, oh, we'll work together again. Again, power in the tongue. And I'm speaking stuff and not even realizing the power that God had in me. 2 weeks later, the lady who was working with him got fired. And immediately they need somebody to come in. So, of course, they called on me. So I would go downstairs and I began to work with him again. So 2 months into the process, they posted the job. And at this point, it's 5 months that I've been working with him. So they posted the job. And the hiring manager with the HR department called me and said, hey, did you apply? You know, the job has been posted. As soon as I applied, they took the job off. And come to find out, I was like, oh, they took it off because they finally knew I applied and I was just going to get the job. Not the case. So after they took it down, a friend of mine was interviewing for the job as well. She was like, I just want to let you know. I was like, oh, well, you know, the best person to get it, because at this point I'm confident. Like, they're already going to give me the job. They took the job down because I applied. Lo and behold, she was like, well, I interviewed yesterday. I was like, you interviewed? At this point, I'm just like, they didn't call me for an interview. So the interview process closed and they didn't even call me for an interview. So I'm sitting at my desk, devastated. Like, they didn't even call me for an interview. So I was like, don't give up. You go upstairs to that HR department and you tell them why you deserve this job. So at this point, I'm sitting there getting my Rocky mode on. Like, if you could have played the music of me running up to the stairs, like, you know, the Rocky music, that would have been playing when I went up there. So as soon as I get up there, she's moving boxes because they were renovating her area. As soon as I walk in and saw her moving boxes, I was like, she better not ask me to move no boxes because I'm not going to do it. Sure enough, she turns around and goes, hey, Tia, you mind helping me move these boxes? And automatically I was like, sure. So for 30 minutes, I'm moving boxes and helping her move her stuff around. We go into her office, and at this point, it's hot. So I go in there and sit down. I was like, do you want the door open or closed? She was like, leave it open because it's hot. At that moment, the speech that I had downstairs was not the speech that I gave at this point. I'm humbled, I'm tired, I'm hot, I'm teary-eyed, and I'm just telling her why I deserve this opportunity to at least interview for the job. She goes, well, we just think you're too young. We think that you don't have enough experience. But, you know, other jobs will come, but this job just isn't meant for you. At that point, I walk out of there feeling defeated, tears in my eyes. I go to the bathroom. I cry my eyes out. And then at that point, I was like, God, you know, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. Literally, I get myself together. I walk back to my desk. The phone is ringing. I pick it up and I go, hello, because it was just the manager I was speaking with. And she says, hey, so you will never believe this, but my boss came in while you were giving your speech to me, and he said that we should at least give you an interview. And that's the power of God right there, because I knew it was God at that point, because remember, I was running up the stairs to give my Rocky speech. I didn't want to move boxes. And if I would have went into her office, I would have closed the door, because what I had to say was not going to be all Christian-like. So I closed the door. The door was open because I helped her move boxes. And when I was moving boxes, remember, her boss wasn't in the office. So if I never would have moved boxes, if I never would have helped her at that moment, and if we never would have went to her office and left the door open, her boss would have never heard this speech. So at this point, I'm like, God, I see you're working it out. So I get the interviews. I slay the interviews. Me and God, my mom told me to take oil there. I'm throwing oil, you know, finding out where the interviews are, putting oil on the tables, on the doors. And it's like David and Goliath. I was like, God, I'm going to go in here and slew these giants. So I slew the giants. And everybody was, you know, even people were calling me saying, oh, I heard your interview was, you know, great. Like, even in one interview, it was like 7 people. Like, I basically had the people in there shouting. So I'm like, this is good as mine. Like, I'm walking around. I got my chest held out again. And at this point, they call me and they say, well, you did do a great job in all 3 interviews, but we're going to repost the position because we want to get more candidates. At this point, I'm feeling defeated again, because it's like, God, we did everything. I did everything that you told me. When I look at it back at this process now, it was God had to humble me, because God knows where he was going to take me. And it's like, you have to take full responsibility and know that it's never you and it's always God. So now that I look back at the process, I see what he was doing. But during it, I was devastated. So at this point, I've cried enough tears. I've had enough emotions. So I just totally surrendered it to God. And like, God, if I get it, I know it's totally you. So Sanjay's in Afghanistan at this time. And when you're in Afghanistan at this point, because this was about 5 years ago now, they had a satellite phone. And the only reason to use the satellite phone is to call family or for emergencies. And you can't even call your family every day because it's like $25 a minute. out of nowhere, after I prayed that prayer, he calls me on my work phone and says, hey, for some reason, something just told me to call and check on you. And I'm like, really? So he was like, yeah, what's going on? So I tell him, he was like, well, did you get the job? I was like, no, they open up to other candidates. He was like, I'm going to take care of this right now. Lo and behold, an hour later, they called me to the HR department and they offered me the job. And at that point, I was relieved, but I'm like, look at you, God. It's like every obstacle that came in my way, you blocked it. And the time of you blocking it, you grew me to the person and the Christian that I needed to be. So my testimony, I want to share with everybody because, number one, when God has something for you, then nothing can stand in your way. They told me I was too young. They told me I didn't have enough experience. They told me that, they were going to open this job up to numerous of times to other candidates. But God knew that job was for me. And then the other thing that I want you to take away is that life and death lies in the power of the tongue. Who would have ever thought that years ago when I was walking through CNN and I said, I'm going to work here one day, that God took my little sentence and said, you sure are? Or who would have ever thought that when I was walking in there and just saying that, told Sanjay, like, oh, one day that this won't be the last time that we're working together, that God took my little prayer and it actually worked out. That God took my little prayer and it actually worked out. So what my testimony, I say it to myself all the time because anytime I get down or anytime I get out, I always remember the power of God. And that's my testimony on They Overcame By.
I don't know about you, but I was totally blown away for the fact that when we did Corinthia's testimony in Atlanta, Georgia, that in the Bible, God talks about he knows the plans and the thoughts that he has for you, that he has for me. All Corinthia had to do was basically step aside and be obedient. Sometimes even myself, we have to learn the hard way, where as soon as we want to puff up our chest and say, yeah, it's me, I got it, God steps back. I pray from this testimony that you've heard that yes, God has a plan for you, but we have to submit. Corinthia did submit, and the Lord blew her mind. God says in his word, no weapon formed against you will prosper. He set Corinthia up for the job that she's always wanted. He will do the same thing for you. Why? Because he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. You can bet your bottom dollar. Now, folks, for those of you that have enjoyed this testimony, please subscribe, please share, and tell others that They Overcame By is your global testimony central. That's right, guys. This is the hub for all testimonies to be pushed and sent to the world to give hope. Now, I meet people and they say, well, Jason, I don't have a mind-blowing testimony. I don't have a testimony that is exciting. Let me tell you something. Everything that God has done for your life is amazing. It doesn't have to be, I was driving in a car, I got hit 20 times and I walked out. No. A testimony simply glorifies what God has done in your life. Don't ever be deceived and think that your testimony won't release chains. The word says that we have overcome by the word of our testimony. Your testimony is not for you, folks. It's for someone else. All right, folks, I did tell you I do have a bonus today. Our bonus is going to happen in the next couple of minutes. But before it shows up, what are you going to do with God's love? Are you going to hide it? Are you going to block it? Or are you going to share it? This is Jason Moore with They Overcame By, you know what, the word of your testimony. Enjoy your bonus.
In 2009, I think, or 8, my husband got a job, and we were happy about it, and so we decided that we would buy a house so that we could accommodate the space and kind of just live differently. And so we bought a house in 2011, and I was not employed simply because we had young children and I wanted to stay home with them. And my husband was working and things were going well. You know, the finances were a little tight, but we were making it. And then we got pregnant. And when we got pregnant, I was just finishing up my master's degree. And this was in, I said we bought the house in 2011, but we bought it in 2009 or 2010. Anyway, I had my third born child in 2011 in May, 3 days after the tornadoes in Alabama. And 3 weeks after I had the baby, I graduated with my master's degree in counseling. And about 2 months after that, my husband lost his job. So we were not able to pay our mortgage. We barely had food to eat. Of course, it had its effect on our marriage, and we have a newborn. And I prayed and asked God, what do you want me to do, because I'm qualified to work and have a full-time job. And the Lord instructed me to focus on what was before me, which was this newborn child that he gave us. And in the meantime, my husband was looking for a job, and of course we're getting behind in the mortgage. It got to the point a year later where we got notice of foreclosure, and we tried the government assistance, and the bank just would not work with us, would not. They were just ugly. It was ugly. And so, of course we're praying. Of course I'm praying. I'm fasting, Lord. You know, please give us the house. What is your will? Which way do you want us to go? What direction do you want us to go? And I was getting no answer, just focus on the kids. And so even my parents, and you know, we hadn't really said much to my parents, and of course they're praying. They're in Canada, and they didn't know. And so about a year after that, you know, just kind of we decided we were going to just make some financial decisions. And I called my dad, and he's like, well, what's happening? So I told him. He's like, why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have helped you financially. We could have loaned you the money. What, you know, how much do you need? And you know, I felt like, I guess I was just trying to be independent. So last year in March, my parents came down from Canada, and my dad sat us down at the table and made a proposal that he would contribute to whatever the bank wanted us to pay to keep the house. And that was a Monday. Well, Monday afternoon, he got a call from Haiti, where they're from, stating that his sister died, and the family needed him to pay for the funeral, which meant that the money that he was going to contribute to us keeping our house had to be used to funeralize his sister. And so that, to me, translated like God didn't want us to keep the house. So I accepted it and started to move towards moving out of the house back into our condo, which we managed to keep. We were kind of just renting out. The tenants that were in the condo at the time trashed it. And we had to repair that, keeping in mind that we barely had money for food to eat, and so on and so forth. And by that time, my husband had found a job which was paying less than half of what he was paying with the first job when we bought the house. So I set the date for us to move out of the house into the condo I set the date for July 17th. I called the movers, and I told Everett, this is what we got to do. So we got to turn off the lights, save what little money we had to put towards the condo, and just, kind of stop. And so this was in May that I set the date. And when I set the date, I heard the Lord say to me, did I tell you when to move? And I understood that as meaning, okay, well, maybe you wanted us to move sooner. But I was like, okay, God, we just need the money. Whatever it is you want to do, whichever way you want us to go, I'm here. I'm accepting, your will be done. And so it was June something, our AC broke. Our AC unit broke. And remember, the date to move was July 17th. Our AC unit broke June something, and the next day it was like 100 degrees. outside. So I have 3 kids in the house. It's 100 degrees, and I don't know what to do with myself, but pray. So I put a post on Facebook saying it's really difficult to make decisions when under so much oppression. I was talking about the heat oppression because it was just it was consuming us. And a church member came to me and asked me what was going on because she saw my post. And I told her what was going on, and she told me to call another church member and see if I could get a, a user, like a loaner AC unit. So I did. And she said she didn't have one, but to call her sister who happened to buy an AC unit, and, we could borrow it. So it was a Monday night, and as I was leaving to pick up that AC unit, our garage door broke. And so it was like this way, diagonal, wouldn't close. There's no way we could get it to close. Of course, we had no money to try to pay a professional to close it. So we prayed, Everett and I prayed, because we were like, we cannot put money into something that we weren't going to stay in. And so, what was it, like the next week, my husband came home from work and found 2 of our neighbors at our driveway with their toolboxes ready to fix the garage. So in an hour, they fixed the garage. They got it to open and close properly. We have an AC unit that works, keeping the house cool, and now we have a garage that works. That was a Tuesday of the week after. That was a Tuesday, and so, my husband, the neighbors were outside, and they were saying, we don't want you to leave, we love you so much, and we were so sad that you have to leave. We're like, yeah, this is just kind of what it is. We're sad too, but it is what it is. We had our boxes packed, with everything packed and ready to go, just waiting for, the next pay periods to come and June 17th to come. So the next day is Wednesday, prayer meeting day. I'm leaving the house, gathering the kids in the car, and I see my neighbor across the street smoking her cigarette, just hanging out. So I say to her, just hi, and she's like, hey, y'all, I heard y'all were moving. Why don't you lock the street? And I'm like, yeah, it's cool, but we lost our job. My husband lost his job, and I'm explaining the bank and everything. She says to me, girl, don't you know God can do whatever he wants to do? You just never understand it. She said, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to see what God can do. So I'm like, okay. I thought it was cool, but I thought it was odd that this woman smoking a cigarette had enough faith in God to pray and intercede for me about my house. And so that evening I went to prayer meeting, and the guy that was speaking on prayer meeting spoke about Daniel, and he spoke about the pagan king Darius, who told Daniel that he would pray for him so that the God that he serves would deliver him from the trouble he was in. And I heard that as a prophetic message, still thinking about my neighbor who said she was going to pray for me. And then, so I tell the speaker, I pull him aside and I said, look, you are speaking prophetically to my situation. And he pulls me aside and he says, Natalie, do not move out of your house. He says, 10 years ago, no, he didn't say 10 years ago. He said, God gave us our house, he's talking about him and his wife. God gave us our house, but when it looked like we were going to be foreclosed on, we left, and God told us not, God didn't tell us to leave. And so right then and there, we felt God's moving, we felt his spirit, we prayed, we thanked him. And Everett says to me that morning he prayed and asked God to tell him what we should do, and if we should stay or if we should go. So we felt that as God saying, stay. That was a Wednesday. Thursday, I get a text from my supervisor, and that's another testimony in and of itself. She's my clinical supervisor for my clinical hours, licensure. And she says there's a job opening, and it's at the place where I did my internship. So I applied. No, I didn't apply for the job. I just I forwarded my resume for that particular job. And I got a phone call the next day, and the guy is like, well, I'm sorry, we can't accept you for this particular position because you need to have a terminal license, which I didn't have. I have an associate's license. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess not. Well, the Friday, he calls me and says, we'd like to interview you for a different job. And so that following Tuesday, I went in for the interview and got a job. I got the job, and I didn't apply for it, but I got it. And so, he made me fill out all the applications and stuff for that. And so I'm employed and full-time. And when I showed my husband the offer letter, he told me that the amount of money that I would be getting paid plus what he gets paid is more than what he was getting paid when we first bought the house. So I think that's it. We're still, dot. Of course, the bank is not, they're not working with us still. But I trust that God is going to show his glory through this whole situation. Needless to say, it was difficult on every aspect, but we are still in our house, and I'm going home right now. Just to see you.